Greetings and welcome all. This is the Legacy Guard. This is Draco Argentium, and I am joined tonight by Taurus Crimson and Porglord for our review of Rampage. Gentlemen, thank you for
Good
joining me
evening,
this evening.
Draco. Good evening. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing very well. I've seen some kaiju doing battle. How about yourself?
Well, I cannot complain about such a thing, so I am doing extremely well. What about you, Porg?
I'm doing quite all right.
Glad to hear it, sir. Tonight we're discussing Rampage, the 2018 Dwayne Johnson action adventure where he partnered up with a giant albino gorilla to kick the butt of some other monsters. This is a recent DVD release, and we all had the opportunity to watch it recently. I suppose I'll begin. Basically, Dwayne The Rock Johnson has proven once again that he is the flaw in every skyscraper's building plan. No one can accurately plan for Dwayne The Rock Johnson in any movie. So I felt that the movie was pretty decent. I thought that there were no major flaws to the movie. I enjoyed it. My Mrs. Argentium was also viewing with me. She found it to be entertaining as well. Um, I'm curious though that they definitely left the door open for a series of these if they intended on it. I feel. What are your feelings about this, Taurus Borglord?
Well, I went into this knowing what it was going to be. I mean, this is a movie based on an 80s video game that started out as an arcade game that I first discovered in the late 80s, I think 87, as a Nintendo port for the NES when you had Lizzie and George climbing up buildings, punching holes in the buildings, and eating people when you were on the ground, or you could grab them out of the building. So I went into this with two expectations. I wanted to see two things delivered. I wanted to see monsters climbing up buildings, check. Okay, that's a check.
Big
And the
check.
other, yeah, big check. And the other thing I wanted to see was giant monsters eating people, especially with a red dress. Now, this was a thing in the video game. There was a lady in a red dress in certain levels that you could eat, and this was a big check because this also happened late in the film. So that's all I wanted to see. I knew what I was getting into. This was going to be a an action movie that I was going to defy all kinds of logic, and it did in certain ways. But I was actually surprised at how well it was crafted. I mean, I thought it was convenient as to where the canisters landed and whatnot. But surprisingly, I thought it was fairly well done. And like I said, the two things I wanted to see: monsters on buildings, punching holes in the walls, and eating some people, those were checked off. As a fan of the video game, the rest of it I enjoyed. I thought the monster designs were awesome. I thought the wolf leaping out and attacking the helicopter, that first scene where he grabs the helicopter down, was awesome. And man, I love kaiju films, and I give it an A minus, and that's just for some minor gripes about the a few writers' flaws here and there, but I loved it. I thought it was awesome. What do you think, Porg?
I thought it was okay. I knew the premise of the video game. I never really played it a whole lot. Um, I always have a little trepidation watching The Rock in any movie.
Oh, come on now.
It's just so hard to take his movies seriously, especially when I'm always in the back of my head expecting the people's elbow at any time. But uh, I mean, it was still a good. Like I said, it was an action movie. There was lots going on. Um, some great stunts. I was a little surprised how well or how much they kind of humanized George. Um, I kind of expected. I guess I just expected it to be The Rock against all three of these monsters or whatever. So that was kind of interesting. It was of course, got a pretty big laugh. The first time George flips the rock off. That was pretty great.
That was hilarious. Porg and I watched this together, by the way, and yeah, we both just busted out laughing at that scene.
We found it quite funny here at the Aurelius household as well.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, I think they did, I guess a pretty decent job of with the characters and stuff. The government agent, I don't know the actor that played him, but just kind of playing that kind of like cowboy role or whatever. I mean, that was pretty funny watching him.
That was Jeffrey Dean Morgan.
Yeah, aka Negan. It was pretty funny too, the scene with him and the guy from Energy or whatever. He's like, why don't you just give me the laptop and the rat, and you're free to go out that door. And the guy goes running out there and gets squished, and he's like, oh, that was a little much. So that was a pretty good scene too.
Hilarious. You're figuring this guy would have a bad end, but like it was immediate.
I figured that the alligator was hanging low on the building and was just gonna reach down and grab him, but I mean, my expectations were subverted.
They were, and I was wondering at some point, did Rian Johnson have a hand in this script? But no, he did not. He was nowhere near it.
Well, of course, the ape George had was capable of performing sign language. It kind of felt a little bit like Mighty Joe Young goes to fight some other monsters.
Yeah, I get that, and I want to agree with Porg on his point about the humanization of George. I didn't go into this expecting George to be such a humanized character. I kind of like he said, I figured it was The Rock against these three kaiju, and I tried to stay away from spoilers and trailers and whatnot, but I really cared about that character. And there's the scene at the end where George seemingly dies, and I told Porg at the time, I was like, this is why kids shouldn't watch this movie, is because that the hero dies at the end, and then of course he comes back alive, and I really cared about that character by the end of the movie, and I thought that was well played, how they created that character from the beginning on.
I would agree. Over at the Aurelius household, we when George seemingly died, it was a moment of disbelief. It was no. These characters have incredible regeneration. They cannot die in this manner. And Mrs. Aurelius said, well, the other two have died. And I had to point out that, well, one of them had his head removed. The other had his brain scrambled. Regenerate all you want. That's not going to fix.
Yeah, the wolf had a hard comeback with the head being ripped off. Yeah, same with Lizzie. I don't think Lizzie's name got mentioned in the film.
They mentioned the wolf had been was dubbed Ralph.
Yeah, they mentioned that, but I don't think the croc got named in the film, unless I missed it.
No, I think the only name that was given to the croc is kill it now, kill it with fire.
Fair enough.
Which I love too. I was gonna say on the Crockett, it's like they're able to track George and Ralph across the land, no problem. I understand, but it's like this giant crocodile. Like, how exactly does it travel from the Everglades to Chicago, and nobody realizes it? I mean, I know it can go in the water and whatever, but the Mississippi's like going to be about the only route it could take, and it's not necessarily that deep that someone's not going to notice this giant crocodile swimming up it.
The Mississippi is very deep, sir, and very wide.
Is it? Okay. I don't know. I just found that a little unbelievable. Just to kind of nitpick some of the things on it. I also thought it was like, Taurus was saying, it was kind of convenient where these canisters drop. You have one in San Diego, one in Northwest Wyoming, and then a third one in the Everglades. That was super convenient how they're able to disperse like that.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, I had a problem with that at the beginning, and that's kind of how the movie starts off. But it's like at the same time, if one of those canisters was dropped anywhere, I mean, if it was dropped in my backyard, it would have turned into a mutant squirrel, you know. So I've I've kind of come to forgive that, and like I get it, you know. They're trying to get. Oh my God, somebody's having a dog attack. Are you guys okay?
Yeah,
Fine
I'm
here.
fine. Sorry.
Is it mute? Um, I, I mean, they had to create George and Lizzie and Ralph. I mean, they had to do that, right? So, I, I get it. I know why they did it, and I'm okay with it now. I kind of had a problem with it when it was going on, but I've kind of learned to live with it.
In a
Well,
counterpoint, I myself never played any of the games. I wasn't familiar with any of the games. I had the brief understanding that it was monsters battling. I didn't know if they battled each other. I don't know. Of course, after having monsters destroying towns, so I found I didn't have anything to judge the movie by. I enjoyed the movie. It seemed to be a fair action adventure flick. Um, to genetically modify creatures to this extent exists at least in this universe, in this movie universe. Uh,
And
my
now,
Go ahead.
well, I was. Did were you in a train of thought?
I'm sorry.
I said, were you in a train of thought? Like, were you rolling on that?
I was going to say that the one thing, the one question that's left open for me is whether or not any of the other canisters of the serum or the pathogen managed to survive the explosion on board the space station. If these canisters are hardened to be able to withstand re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere, then theoretically they should be able to survive an explosion in space. And they may just be floating in a cloud of debris, circulating somewhere around the Earth until they eventually collapse down and infect someone, something, somewhere, somehow.
Well, this movie did make a decent amount of money. The budget was like 138 million, and it did 400 something million. So, I think we will see a sequel. And there are other monsters. I've followed the Rampage continuity since the 80s, so I'm familiar with a lot more monsters, and it would be cool as a fan to see some of these come in. But the other issue Porg mentioned to me yesterday when we were watching it is kind of the size difference between, so you have a gorilla who is a large animal and a crocodile and a wolf, and the wolf proportionately is larger than the gorilla once it's mutated, and then the crocodile seems bigger than really all of them. So was that a technical aspect I missed we both missed in the movie, or?
I would say that that's a function of how much the creatures were able to feed on and how much energy they had to expend in defending themselves and healing themselves. The wolf was larger than George because the wolf had access to an open amount of food much faster than George did. George was
Okay.
kept in confinement for longer than the wolf. Wolf was never in confinement. However, both George and the wolf were then attacked on multiple occasions by the United States military, and they took damage. They had to regenerate. They had to stop and expend this energy fighting back and destroying these troops. Whereas the alligator was able to eat up whatever fish or amphibious, whatever it could find along the way. It may have eaten a few boats on the way. Who knows? But clearly, no one was aware it even existed until it shows up in Chicago and just crawls out of the river.
Yeah, exactly. How close is the Mississippi to Chicago?
Well, the Mississippi runs along the edge of the state of Illinois, but
Okay,
it's
so
not
it does
exactly.
border Illinois at least.
It borders Illinois, yes.
yeah, I
Okay.
mean it could have swam up the Illinois River, and then it's because they're actually having this problem in real life with an invasive species of carp that have gone up the Mississippi and then up the Illinois River, and they're trying to keep them out to keep them away to keep them out of the Great Lakes. I mean, there is a way for it to work its way up the waterway. So if the water was deep enough, I guess it feasibly could. But an alligator that size, I would have thought someone would have noticed something on it. But yeah, to Draco's point, I mean, I guess that would make sense because, I mean, as far as like George's size and like even George's mutations, because like, I mean, if you look at the wolf, I mean, Ralph, like it has like spikes along its spine. You have that scene where it like spreads its legs and turns into like this giant flying squirrel.
That was actually a laugh out loud moment when that thing jumped and kind of turned back around with the flying squirrels on wings on it. That was hilarious.
Yeah, so I mean, you don't see like any of those mutations in George. Like he just gets bigger and stronger, but he doesn't, and regenerates quickly. But like he doesn't have any of those like weird mutations that the other two have. I mean, the alligator didn't necessarily have quite as much as Ralph did, but it did have gills, and then it had an awful lot of horns on it.
Well, from the very moment that the canisters crash down, immediately you find out that that the wolf has already killed off the rest of the wolf pack, and it may have eaten a bunch of them. Whereas George did not stop to eat. He killed a grizzly bear because it scared him and it pawed him. But this again may be a function of him not having food available right away.
Right, and no, I mean, and now that and when you say that, it like I said, it does make sense. But I mean, still, I mean, he does kind of crash out of the plane and has a chance to run away a little bit with the wolf in tow. So I mean, I don't know exactly when all of those wolf's mutations kind of happen because I mean, when you first see it and it's going after Joe Maglione's crew there in Wyoming, it's just grown in size. Like you don't see those spines along it, and you don't know when it gets the wings. But I mean, like I said, it did have a lot more access to, I guess, a wider variety of food than George did. But I mean,
So
it makes sense. But
are we assuming Lizzie just had tons of access to food while she was swimming up the Mississippi?
All of the food. That's my assumption.
All the food, all the time.
Yeah, I'd agree with you guys. So Draco, what was your favorite part of the movie?
My favorite part of the movie actually. I think that my favorite part of the movie has to be when the plane is crashing, where they have George on board, and George flips out because they flipped on the radio frequency signal, and there's been a hole blown out through the side of the plane as it's falling down. Everyone's being sucked downward towards this hole, towards George, which is kind of insta death at this point. But instead, the rock hits the control, the rear ramp goes down, and suddenly the flow of air reverses itself to where everything's being sucked out the back of the plane. I appreciated that the physics that existed here, how that was consistent with something you could expect in the real world, even though you have a giant monkey that's causing this plane to crash. I really appreciated that part when they jumped out of the back of the plane.
Yeah, if only Star Wars writers could use that kind of logic.
If only. But if they brought Dwayne the Rock Johnson into a Star Wars movie, oh man, you wouldn't need Luke Skywalker with the exhaust port. I mean, just send him to the Death Star and it'll crash on itself.
I mean, I know this isn't a Star Wars movie, but you want to talk about how to fix Star Wars? Just cast The Rock.
I don't know.
Cast The Rock in all of them. He can even play a different role in every movie, and it's instant success.
Quite possibly.
I jest.
Porglord, what was your favorite part of the movie, sir?
I think it's that kind of that first scene with George and watching him and Rock interact with the other gentleman that ran, and he's like, oh, he's crying, and then trying to fist bump, and George just flips him off. I thought that was a great scene.
Taurus?
My favorite scene was when George ate the woman in the red dress. They had put the antidote in the purse, and he grabs this woman up and chomps her down. It was a total fanboy moment. It was a kaiju eating a human being, especially a woman in a red dress. That was awesome for me. But I also the moment you guys described, you kind of stole a couple of my other favorite moments. So I have to agree with those as well. Those were both awesome. But that was my pinnacle moment as a fanboy of the games.
Excellent. So, gentlemen, final statement on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most amazing thing possible. I'm going to give this a solid 8.5. What about you, Taurus?
If we're going 1 to 10, now for what it was, we knew what we were getting into. We knew this was going to be a rock kind of action movie based on a video game. I would have to agree. I think 8.5. There were a few things that kind of bothered me, but for the most part, I was very satisfied. So, I you know what? I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go a 9. I'm gonna go a 9 because I originally said A minus when I talked to Porg yesterday, and that would be around a 90. So I'm gonna say a 9. What about you, Porg?
I'm gonna have to go like 6.75.
Whoa!
I mean,
Hater!
it was all right. I mean, it's a typical rock movie. I mean, maybe I'm just a little prejudiced. I mean, I like Dwayne Johnson, but just not his movies. I mean, the kaiju, getting to see the giant monsters, that was really great. Just watching The Rock try to run around and do some of his, action moves, just kind of, it gets a little repetitive after a while. I mean, I wouldn't not recommend the movie, but I'm not gonna necessarily go out of my way to recommend the movie either. So,
Legacy Guard fans, this will be our last broadcast with Porglord. He is no longer welcome on the Legacy Guard. No, I jest. Draco, you want to close this out?
Sure. All right, everybody. We really appreciate you tuning in for this review of Rampage. Just remember, everyone, be kind, live long and prosper, and may the
And may the
force
force be with
be with
you.
you.